Hey guys, it's been a while. Today we're going to cover UV mapping and how to just throw some basic textures onto our character. This isn't going to go too far in depth on how to make textures. It's just going to kind of get a super raw and rough idea out. And next tutorial will cover that. I really don't know how to explain the artistic process. Usually it's just the technical stuff. I'll try and break down some of the technical skills that you can apply to your textures and how to work it out. Um, but otherwise, it's going to be all up to you. Um, Experiment, have fun with it, play around with it. But either way, we'll get there. We'll get there. Um, for this though, we're just going to be unwrapping this character and setting a basic texture. Like I said, this is going to be a little heavy on pre-band base, and for any of you guys who've been kind of keeping up with the news and kind of why this series got delayed for a little bit, pre-band base got pulled by the original creator. I have backed up a version of pre-band base, the latest version actually of pre-band base, on my website. You can download it there. I'll provide a link down in the description. I'll also provide a I'll also provide a link to Grinmore, who is picking up the torch, if you will, for pre-band base, and they are working really hard to make sort of new pre-ban base with lots of new features, fixing lots of bugs. And we'll have a new tutorial on how to use new pre-ban base later, just because it's quite a bit different than the current version. But this tutorial will cover just this. So, all right. So with that being said, we're going to check if pre-ban base is set up. Now, go watch my pre-ban base like setup and how to use tutorial. It will cover how to install it on Blender, how to get it set up for Aseprite. But for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to open up that little tab on the side. If it's shrunk down like this, it's this tiny little arrow. This is why I have the magnifier out, actually, is for all the tiny UI. And look for the pre-ban base tab. We're going to click it if it's not already selected. And mine's still looking, but we're going to connect. Yours should look like this, where it'll say sync off. And we're going to connect. It's going to say waiting. And from here, we're going to actually go to Aseprite, go to File, and then Sync. Hide. It's like it's trying to sync a different texture, but that's okay. Back over here, and we're still waiting. Why are we waiting? We've already synced. We don't have any other instance open. So let's stop that instance. Let's try again. There we go. It looks like I had something still hanging in the air from a previous session. Let's double check. And connected, that's what we want to see. So now that we have them kind of synced up, we need to create a texture for our character to use. So we're going to go down here to this checkerboard orb, and we already have a kind of a base material set. We can load that in, and that's this material right here. Now you can swap this out and have the base material be the texture you want to use. What I actually like to do is I like to add in a new texture, new material. Oh, I'm doing the wrong thing. And we're gonna call this one our character underscore matte. So I use naming conventions for textures and materials. I'll use underscore matte or underscore text so that I know what's what. I strongly recommend using naming conventions, and in fact, we should probably name all of the objects that make up our character. That's going to be something that we're going to cover more into rigging, where it's even more important to have naming conventions. But for the most part, like I said, I strongly recommend setting up a sort of naming convention so that you can follow the flow of things. So if our character had a specific name, I would give this that character's name and then underscore matte. That way, if we have a scene with multiple objects, multiple characters, it's easy to figure out what material goes where and what character is what. So the next thing we want to do is go into UV editing. We want to go to Sprite, which should be a new menu when you install Preband Base, and we're going to click New. I'm going to give it a name. So this is going to be our character underscore text. And we're going to set the size. So set the size to whatever you want. I'm going to start with 256 by 256. Now I don't, personally I don't do the only 256 I guess challenge or rules that a lot of low poly artists like to follow. I don't stick to 256 polygons. I don't stick to 256 by 256 for the texture. It's just what you need. And for me, for a character model, 256 by 256 is going to be the bare minimum that we should need to detail our character out. Now, of course, this operation is going to be really good if you have a dual monitor setup where you can have one monitor have Blender and the other have Aseprite. Fortunately, I can't stream that, or it'll look a little weird. So we're going to be swapping between the applications as we go. So now that we have this done, we're going to begin work on the torso. That's going to probably be the easiest place to start. So first we need to apply our character material, and then we need to set the texture. So clicking that little yellow dot next to base color, we're going to find image texture. We're going to go to this drop down right here, and there it is, character text. I'm going to set mine from linear to closest. Now if you want it filtered, like it's an N64 game, keep it on linear. That's probably going to be the most accurate representation of how the N64 textured things, like filtered things. And then the last thing we're going to do is I'm going to need a little bit of room right here. Go up to this shading drop down, set it to flat and texture. And that's going to make this transparent because we don't have any texture. So once we go into edit mode, half of it's going to disappear because if you remember, we have our modifier on it. This is very important for when we're UV mapping because it means we only have to do half the work if our character is symmetrical. If your character is not symmetrical, then try and take all of these things that we apply to our character and do it on a per object basis instead of relying solely on mirror like we're doing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the front and the back first. And I'm going to do something some of us call like orthographic projection or a hard set like cube map projection, stuff like that. Essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to be setting it up to where we project from the camera view and we get a flat shape over here. So we're going to do UV, and then we're going to do project from view right here. And that's going to give us our two shapes. Now they're overlapping. So up here, there's these sets where you can edit the like the vertex, the edge, and the face of a UV, kind of like a 3D object. But there's this other set right here that lets you set the island. This is kind of like you're moving the whole object itself. So I know this one right here is the back. So what I'm going to actually do is do this, and I'm going to flip it. So we're going to right click. Let's see, mirror, is this mirror Y? No, it's mirror X every time. And I'm going to kind of keep them together like this. And we're going to scale them. So I'm going to try and fit the character for the most part, at least from the shoulders down to the ankles at the height of this. So at that 256 pixels. That way our pixel density isn't super mega big to start with. So shrink this down. It'll probably be about half the image. And I'm going to put this right here. And so I want to keep like objects together, and especially like for the most part on the same X and on the same X axis or Y axis, sorry. So I don't want to shift this down because whenever we go to paint the texture, we want to try and kind of have it flow through, almost like we unwrapped this. So now I'm gonna select the sides, and I can probably select this one too right here. And we're gonna keep that top plane for later. Trust me, it'll get taken care of. Same thing, select our orthographic view and project from view. Now the size of this projection is going to fit how far your your view is. So if your view is all the way out here, whenever you do your orthographic, it's going to be this big over here. Just like if it's over here, it's going to be kind of blown out. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to select this shape, which has roughly the same which has all of the same points I want to keep an eye out for. I'm going to put this bottom vertex right here overlapping there, because that's how it is on the original shape. I'm going to try and stretch this out until I see this vertex right here meet with that one, because that would be this vertex right here in our edit mode. Let's see, let's do that, this one right there. So once I have those pretty close together, like having it a little bit off, it won't matter. But if you get a little bit uncomfy with it, then feel free to edge and poke some of the vertices around so that everything lines up. So now I'm going to select all of the stuff that we've had UV mapped and line them up just like that. So now we have this kind of unfolded version of like the front, the side, and the back all lined up right here. So here we can either go into Aseprite and we can start building out our texture, or we can keep UV mapping. Now, I probably want to finish UV mapping the texture or the shape first. So we're going to do this one right up here next. UV project from view. I'm going to need to rotate that. And it's mainly because my whole character is modeled 90 degrees. Select all of these. I don't need every single one. Technically, I just need the top so that I can make sure that this is the right shape. I'm going to try and line these up once again. It doesn't matter if the edges overlap, as long as the points, whenever you drag it across, overlap, then it'll be fine. And I think we can just take our whole set of islands and bring it down. And of course, if you really want this to overlap too, just because you want the absolute perfect amount of uniformity, I guess, whenever you do your texture, then yeah, you can take this and just pop it down. You can either do it like this, just kind of eyeballing it, or you can set up your magnet tool, set it to vertex, and it'll snap. And that tool is actually extremely handy. So that's our full torso, UV mapped and ready to go. So now let's go to Aseprite and well, how do we know where the UVs are? Like, we vaguely know they're right here. So what we need to do is we need to go over to sync and press it again. And it's going to ask us a new set of prompts to import or export animation and to show UV. So we want to click show UV and we want to hide this. If it doesn't refresh automatically, then just like select anywhere and it'll refresh and put the UV in. It's a little dark for me, so I'm going to double click that UV layer and I'm going to bring up the opacity. And there we go. There's our UV set. So in order to kind of show this off in real time, I'm going to actually do this split view type of thing right here. And I'm going to try and position this in a way so we can see what's happening. Come on. Trying to get Snap to work. Let's load in some custom palettes. Let's use the Capcom palette that I normally fly with. Let's see, what color set do we want to go for? Let's use the same set that I've been using for character so far. And all I'm going to do is just kind of vaguely paint out what I want. So let's get a round brush, get it kind of small, start painting. And sorry for the magnifier wiggle. Like that's just going to happen as we draw this out. And I'm probably not going to use the magnifier for our drawing tutorial, but that'll be okay. I don't think it'll be needed. So we've vaguely filled out our character, but it doesn't look any different than, what it did whenever it didn't have any textures. So what I'm going to do is just kind of block out some shapes. Mm. And we could see it's updating over here real quick. So I'm not going to try and be super detailed on it. I'm just going to kind of give a vague idea of what I want from the character, as far as like where the shading's going to go. So any like extra detail, like, oh, maybe I want like some lines right here. Maybe we want a little shade for the belly button. Clavicles. I know this character, she has a like this blue triangle right here. Maybe it's more right here. So you get the idea. Just paint vaguely what you want on your shape first to get the idea out. So we can obviously see like there's some like odd tears and some things that just don't line up, but that's okay. We just want the base shape going on and the base, like the base idea for our character textured out. So from here we can move on to our next thing. And I really want to mention this one as far as like the importance of using mirror for symmetrical characters is, as you can see, like it drew the texture on the other side because it's mirrored. And that's not only space we can save in a very limited texture set, especially if you want to strictly follow those rules of only using a 256 by 256 texture sheet, but it also means that we don't have to UV the other half. And the same can go for the legs, the arms, even the hands. So let's do the arms real quick and kind of get an idea of how we can push that even further, I guess. So our arms are interesting because we have these two end caps. So we need to think about how we want that to look as we work, like generate our character out. What's it going to look like if the character bends our arms and whatnot? So we don't want anything weird or odd and jarring from the get-go. Something that'll kind of tell future us as we start to detail the texture, like, hey, like follow this flow. we're going to go into edit mode. We're going to do the exact same thing we've done before. But this one's going to be a little bit weirder. So UV, project from view. So I know that the smaller shape, looking at the orthographic view, I know that the smaller shape is the island in front. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to bring it down here and make sure that they're still on the same x-axis. I do the same for these two, for the top. UV, project from view. I have to rotate these. By 90 degrees. So this one's a little bit more odd because I actually don't know which shape is bigger from the camera view alone, but from the side view I can tell the bottom island is the bigger one. So I'm actually going to select both of these now, remembering that this bottom one is our front. And I'm just going to kind of line them up. Do that exact same thing where I try and get some of these points to match each other. Like I said, of course, if you really want to and you don't mind the warping, you can absolutely move and snap these UV vertices together. So same as before, try and get it as close as possible and bring that shape in. And so what we'll need to do is actually flip this one. So that one's going to be mirror Y. That way we get this nice flow through. So now we need the arm to match the scale of the torso. Now, what we can do is select both of the shapes and go back. And I can select like this shape right here. And that'll give us a rough idea of the scale, since I can tell roughly that the top, so these slightly thicker pieces are about the same length as this right here. And then I can look at from the back and tell that the front and back pieces are a little bit smaller than the top and bottom of this back piece. So let's do that. What I'm going to do is mirror this again, except this time on the x-axis. I'm going to bring this up all the way over here. Let's actually use this one right here. No. Which one to use? I think this one. And we're just going to guesstimate it. So a lot of this is guesstimation. I find that eyeballing it and guessing it, you get really good results. And the reason I say like really good results is like what I mean is like really good results in the guise of trying to match how they were doing it way back in the 90s. Is a lot of them, like 3D was a new concept. None of them had ever done it. Most of them were doing 2D stuff and playing around with other things. There were a few people who understood it, but for the most part, a lot of them did like what we're doing here, where they just projection mapped everything and kind of guessed the UV. And that's kind of what leads to the charm of it. You know, that those warped textures, things that are slightly off scale. And of course, like I said, if you're one of those people who that's not your MO, go for it. Like, go and have fun. And oh, wow, look at these. They're actually projected correctly. Go and have fun and like make sure everything is perfect. But for those of you who really want to have that rough, old school, absolutely cobbled together look, go for that as well. I think that's the biggest thing that I really want to try and employ in my tutorials is to just have fun with it and do whatever you like the most. All right, so we have this big shape and this small shape. We do need to rotate them. I think 90 degrees this way. We need to bring back the rest of the arm so that we can start scaling those. This guy's probably more right here. And then the same thing, go over here. Our UVs have updated, and I need to pick a skin tone for my character. So what are we gonna do? I've got basically everything from, maybe not there, but from here up are all the skin tones that I keep in this palette, which, yeah, I know, this palette's pretty outdated. And I think the one that I use for her is, it's either one of these two. So we're gonna kind of stick, let's see, let's do this one. I'm sure I'll look back at this and go, oh, wow, not, once again, I don't get the skin tone of my character, my own character, right? It happens. Now you'll notice it didn't apply over here. That's because, well, we only applied the texture to the torso. So for our new object that we want to apply the texture to, we got to go back down to that orb, and we're going to go and click this one, this drop down right here, go to character matte, and there it is. So since we use baked lighting in a way for Mega Man Legends, we want to follow that. Now there are one of two ways you can do it. You can either have the lighting be like kind of this weird like straight down, but then ignores certain things. Um, or we can do it like kind of this 45-degree angle from the front. So that would mean that the back and bottom would be shaded, but the top and front wouldn't. For me, we're just gonna do the stick to the top down. It's gonna be the easiest. And so with that, I want to pick all of the shapes that I think are going to be affected by this top down style of shading. And here we go. Ooh, this one needs to be flipped. So let's actually do that. And that's going to be pretty easy. There we go. And then we're going to go back to Aseprite. It's updated. And we're going to select our next shade level. I don't like this one. This one's a bit desat. So what we're going to do is kind of see what other colors I have. Those two are the same color, aren't they? I could just dive straight into the darker. Let's do that. So for these end caps, it's just going to be a straight shot. And then for the arms. So on this side, it should be right there. So what we need to do is over here, we need to kind of keep track on where they end. As you can see, we're a little bit high up on this side. And this is where pre-band base comes in absolute handy. because we can keep track of that. We can see what's going on, and we can do our adjustments as we go. So I'm going to call that one close enough. We're going to look at this side next. Do the same thing. And of course, all of this stuff we're going to end up tweaking when we do the textures. So we'll be showing off like, okay, like pushing UVs so that they line up a little bit better, because like, look, that quarter pixel gap right there, it'll drive people nuts, trust me. It'll drive me nuts. And then this one's our last one. So same as before. Let's make sure we're not like sliding into in a territory we don't need to be. Use our fill tool. Oop, I still have continuous turned off. There we go. And yeah, there's our arm. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to kind of speed run through all of the easier stuff. We're going to stop and review how to do more complex shapes like the face, the hair, and maybe the hands and feet. So sit back, enjoy the speed paint, and I'm going to catch you guys in just a little bit so that we can talk about how to UV map more complex shapes. We've talked about this in our first tutorial, which was making the ramen cup, but our character is quite a bit more complex than a ramen cup. So see you in a sec. All right, for the most part, we've got quite a lot of the character done and a whole bunch of super basic textures set in. I saved some of the hardest stuff for last, and it's going to be pretty easy once you get the flow of it, especially for like the hands and feet. They have a lot of the same workflow of just take it one side at a time and try and do what we've been doing, which is unfold it and put it down into the UV map first before we start painting. The big part here is, as you can see, like we're not super optimized, you know. Normally what I would do, especially for like limbs, like arms and legs, these side views would actually overlap each other. So like this one and this one would actually have overlap and use the same texture, and that would save us quite a bit of space. But I didn't do it here just for this sake of keeping the tutorial kind of simple and easy. But this does open up the opportunity to learn about how do I use more than one texture and keep that set up with pre-band base. And so we'll cover that whenever we get to the face and the hair, which we'll save for a separate texture. The best part about, or the best reason behind saving things like the face and the hair for a separate texture too is if you're feeling extremely adventurous and you want to go and animate textures, which is a definitely a high level thing that we're going to learn way down the line in the future. Um, but if you ever get to that point to where that's something you want to do, then having the face be on a separate texture makes that so much easier. So just kind of keep that in mind. And keep that in mind for any texture that you want to animate. Try and separate it out, make it its own object, and give it its own texture set. So let's get started on the hands. Since that one's going to be the toughest one, the feet are pretty easy. They're going to follow the same steps, minus one end cap. On the hands, I think are going to be our hardest one for the body set. Um, the hair is going to be probably the hardest thing that we work on once again. So we're going to go in edit mode. Once we have it selected, we're going to make sure we have our material put on it. Once again, following the mirror. It saved us so much time, that mirror. And the first thing we're going to do is kind of, once again, treat it like it's a cube. And we're going to look at what's facing where. So I'm going to take this top and this bottom right here, and we're going to start there. That's going to give us these two nice shapes. Because we don't have a lot of space to move around, what I'm going to do is first I'm going to shrink it down. I'm going to give it an approximation in size because this is a separate object. I'm not going to worry too much about making sure it matches 100% the scale of its neighbors, but just close enough. So we're going to do this, and I'm going to separate out the islands. Let's see. So our bottom is going to be our smaller. So what we're going to do is do this. We're going to select this one and mirror Y. It's not going to show up here as mirrored just yet, but when we start texturing it will. We're going to do the sides next. And even though it seems like this is a prime opportunity to do that thing that I mentioned earlier where we can overlap the sides and just paint the straight up texture, not for this. Humans don't have thumbs on both sides of their hands. If your character does, though, where their hands are symmetrical like that, feel free to, but we're going to keep this one as simple as possible. Or at least as far as creating a character goes. So same thing as before, project from view. That's going to give us this shape right here. And it's turned around a bit from our last view. So what we're going to do here is mirror X. And this is the top view. So I'm going to use that as our reference for scale and bring this down until we have roughly the scale we want. Once again, we're going to do all of this kind of cleanup and whatnot where all of the pixels line up quite a bit more perfectly. I'm not going to say be absolutely perfect, but quite a bit more perfectly later on down the road. We're going to select this one once again, get that top and bottom view. I'm going to bring this over here, mirror Y, push this in, and just try and get at least one point to merge overlap. So that should be roughly the full round of the hand. I'm realizing I could probably have gotten away with having that on the bottom, given how much it is. So what we'll do is we'll actually correct that. So B, project from view. And for slanted shapes like that, the best method whenever you're doing this like project from view, like, you know, super manual cube map style of UV mapping, is as you go through the each of the orthographic views, see how much of the face is visible to the camera. Like I can tell that that right there is not as visible as, like, it's a smaller shape from this view than it is from this view. And so that's how I decide. Now, if I have things that are even 45-degree angle, what I'll do is I'll actually click this right here, the switch current view, and it'll be current view in orthographic. I'll go over here and I'll see these, the X and the negative Y, or X and positive Y, or whatever. And let's say they're skewed off like this, where I can see the back ones. I'm going to try and overlap them just like that until they're close enough, and then project from view. And that's going to be how I get my orthographic 45-degree angle projection. Once again, we're going to avoid using that in this case, just to keep it pretty simple. I believe we did something very similar to it in the ramen tutorial, so you should be familiar with it if you've already covered that. So here's our hand, almost fully disassembled. We still have one more shape right here, this front shape. Since this one's mostly seen from this view, UV, project from view, and then we're going to actually stitch this right here on top of that. Now when you do this, where you have these separate parts and you're trying to put them together to recreate or create a bigger island, you have to be careful about if you've already mirrored stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of select our full shape. Everything we've got here. Oh, we got a little bit of the end cap. That's okay. We'll include that too. And I'm going to go over here actually. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab whatever color, like this one's fine. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make little squares on the ends. And this will kind of tell me if the alignment is right. So it looks like for these two shapes, it's right. It's right there. If I tumble this right here, we didn't do any on this one. Good. This one right here, we have this shape. But this one's backwards. So all we need to do for that is grab all of this and mirror Y. So doing like a little bit of keystoning like that really helps out. Now, we don't know if this one's backwards yet either. So let's see what we can do to help that out. Actually, this top one's backwards as well, I just noticed. Mirror Y. So we'll just do this. And yeah, it lines up, even if it's not fully even. All right, let's get this end cap done. next. And the reason I want to get it out of the way is so that we can just kind of cover the hand all in one bit. Let's see. It looks like this is the top. So that should be pretty easy. We're just going to rotate this 90 degrees, push it over. And I'll probably speed paint through how to do the leg, because like I said, or the foot, because we already did part of the leg. And you can just kind of use this as an example. Now, if you guys feel like some of these like speed step throughs are a little bit like you do need the help, let me know. Let me know. Because then I can adjust these tutorials as we go. Um, I plan on doing like reworks of these as I go, where we deal with either more complex models or we do different style of models, and those will warrant new tutorials. And having all of the info about what kind of tutorial you guys want is extremely helpful. All right, we have all that set up. So select all. There's our hand. We're ready to put down our base texture. Oh, looks like our UV map didn't update. Sometimes this happens. Weirdly enough, I find that if you just kind of play around with it, sometimes it'll work. And this is a bug of pre-Bambase that I've covered before. She doesn't want to do it, so let's do this. View, home. There we go. Sometimes if you switch the view to like either home on Aseprite or another image, and then you come back to this one, it pops in. I don't know what causes it. It happens. So what I'm going to do here is super basic. We're going to paint all of this in, and we're just going to kind of vaguely draw out a hand like we've been doing with everything else. So we might put a little bit more detail on this one since it's going to need it. So let's grab our secondary color, and let's start getting out, figuring out where fingers are. Everybody has 4 fingers for the most part. You know, looking good. If we want to put like knuckles or something, you know, like feel free. So next we want to figure out where the thumb is. That might be on the other end. Yeah, that's down there. Select all. Reset that. So what I like to do is just try and get the thumb into the fist, just like this. And do a couple of creases for the fingers. Or you can do it this way. Here's another method. Where we do it more like this. And what I'm going to do is I am going to cheat a little bit. I am going to copy this and flip it. Try and figure out how to put it in the right spot. I'm going to remove the thumb. So all we have are like is the other finger, just like that. We can look at it on the other side. That looks pretty good. Now the bottom. Now we're not gonna shade this like we would the other one, like the rest of the arm. This is because we want to kind of keep track of things. So what I want to do is figure out where the fingers are and get a good vague idea. Looks like we're 3 pixels apart. So we're going to do that, and then we're just going to kind of terminate. We could probably do that right here too. And then if you remember, we had a thumb. So this one's going to be a little bit weird to figure out where it is. Yeah, so our pinky doesn't even line up. Oh, this is flipped. Okay, so it's right over here. Oh, yeah, I knew that. Oh, man, sometimes, I swear. It's okay, we all make mistakes. And that's part of learning. That's why we make these tutorials. So we can get better. Alright, so now we've got to account for the thumb. Yeah, like that looks pretty decent. It's not the best, but whenever we get here, we'll know. We'll know what's going on. Too low. Let's see, it looks like we kind of come in right here. So we're just going to have the thumb be right there. There we go. And there you go. That's roughly a hand in low poly pixel art. So I want to do some slight edits here. No, not this side. Where is it? Ah, okay. I see where it is. It's right here. So that's a good base for us to work on for a hand. So we've basically just kind of slowly worked out the fist and how it's rolled around in its most raw form. Sorry if this doesn't translate well. I promise. I promise it'll look good. It'll look much better, and we'll break down every little bit about it in our next tutorial. Okay, so once again, we're going to do a little bit of a speed paint on the feet, and then we're going to meet back for the face and the hair, and I'm going to step through how to set up a secondary material for that. All right, guys, we are on the last part of UV mapping and just setting up basic textures. So I hope that all of this has been making sense, because we're about to use everything that we've kind of learned and talked about in this last bit. This is what I consider one of the hardest parts, just because, like I said, there's a lot going on. We have quite a weird shape to work with. Let's turn on our wireframe. And breaking it down can be a bit difficult. But luckily here, we've employed a lot of other techniques to help us out. So for instance, like if we go to our mirror tools, like even our face and our hair are mirrored. So this is going to be really easy for us to work out, since we'll only have to really, really absolutely worry about one side, if not two sides. So our next thing is, how do we set up for a new material? Because this texture sheet, we're out of space, and even when we start pushing and poking all of our shapes around, we're just going to have enough space to make those corrections for our more detailed texturing tutorial. So what we need to do here is we need to create a new texture for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to Sprite once again, just like we did before, and we're going to do new. Same size. We're going to give it the name character underscore face. Or you can do head, whichever one works for you. Underscore text. And we're going to click OK, and that's going to give us this new sheet. But it's not going to create a new material for us just yet. So we need to go down here, and we need to with the face or the hair, either one selected, we need to go and press new. Let's give it a name. This one's going to be character head matte. And then we're going to go all the way over to our image texture. Once again, it's the same process as when we first set up. And look, there it is right there. It's going to be empty. It's going to be transparent, just like we started. So you can get the idea, like working with multiple textures isn't that freaky or weird. It's the same process as setting up your first texture. And Aseprite and Preband Base will acknowledge it and handle it as you work on it. So we don't have our UV set in this one either. So we'll need to tell it, hey, we would like a UV. So just do the resync, show UV, and that'll pop it in here. So what I think will be the easiest one to work with will be the face, just because the shape isn't that complicated. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of this right here, this extra side that kind of extends out. And I'm actually going to project this from view. I want to set my texture too before we forget. And this is kind of like our under chin and our side of face. This isn't going to be anything super detailed. It's barely seen. So what we can do for this is let's copy our texture set. Actually, it looks like we've been using a mix between these two. Copy, paste. That way I don't have to carry over the entire texture set. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply this texture. That's the same color, right? Make sure I'm not and then for the face, now this is going to be one that I'm going to kind of want to detail a little bit more out. And this one's going to be a little bit difficult. Now, if you don't like working with half faces, because for whatever reason you have you want to in the future animate this in a way to where you can control each individual eye, each individual eyebrow, and that texture, as well as like you know, do stuff like do expressions that aren't symmetrical. From this point forward, what you're going to want to do is actually go over here to your mirror and you're going to want to apply it. I need to get out of edit mode before we can apply it. And so when we select it, you know, it's still going to be the half, but you can tell it's a little bit darker. This is because it's now applied that mirrored half over there. We're actually going to just re-project that. And so now we have a like a full face that we can work with. This one's going to be a little difficult too in the aspect of trying to get an idea of, okay, well, what aspect ratio do we want? Like how much our aspect ratio, what level of detail do we want for our face, and how do we want to set that? Sorry, aspect ratio is not the right word. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of test this out just a little bit. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to put a line down the middle just like this. And this is going to help me with the UV. Oop, we never set our texture to closest. Because I actually want to center this UV ahead of time. Once again, because this is our most complex shape. So the level of detail looks pretty close to what we already have in mind for that. So let's grab in some other textures, some other colors. So I'm going to want this right here. I could probably get away with that, but let's find something that skews more towards the gray right there. So those should be all of the colors that I need for this. And I'm just going to start drawing my character. Let's see, put that a little bit lower down. Yeah, let's go full right there. Looks like I do need black. Let's grab our mirror tool in Aseprite. Since I'm doing a base expression, I can use the mirror tool in Aseprite and not have to worry too much about it. Get a little bit of shading on the nose if we want. We can do a little highlight on the cheeks too. Let's get rid of that mirror, offset that. So we're slightly darker. And so from here, I'm just kind of doing, I don't want to say I'm like trying to work in like a super amount of detail, but I want to work this texture a bit more. And this is going to kind of be a great segue into our next. What's wrong with you? Why is your tolerance being kind of funky? H. Make sure that's mirrored. That is not mirrored. But yeah, like I was saying, this is going to be kind of our segue into doing a lot more detail. Let's see how we're looking over here. Looking good so far. So I'm going to try not overwork anything so that we have enough stuff for our next tutorial. So let's see. Let's use this. Oops. Me says we're going to leave some for the next tutorial and then proceeds to do all of the detail for this. It always happens. That's okay. We won't do anything like eye shades or anything like that. I should push this in just a bit more. But once again, it's just like I said, it's to get an idea of what we want for our final product. So we'll see if that scale for the eyes works out once we get the hair on. But it's looking good. So one way we can kind of cheat the hair for this one is I can actually just set the material back to its default and we can look at it. It looks pretty okay. She's got a deadpan that's not quite desirable, but that's all right. Because we're going to be working on this as we go. But you get the idea of how you should set up the face. And then so normally what I do is select all from here. I'll actually crank down the size of the image. That way I have as much space as possible for expressions. And like I said, in a far future tutorial, we will work in how to do animation expressions. That'll probably be more part of a rigging tutorial and probably much later into that. But setting up and getting ready for it is always super important. That's something that I've learned in programming is to always kind of plan with at least some level of forethought and a future vision, if you will, in mind. All right, so now that we have this set, let's do the hair. Now the hair is going to be super easy. We've left us quite a bit of space anywhere to do this. Now if we feel like, oh, maybe we want the face to be moved down so that we have more space for the hair, we can, so that we can just reserve the top part for the hair and then the rest of the image for faces. For me, it won't matter because we won't need that much space anyways. So for the hair, super simple. We're going to go into our object mode, edit. We're going to put back our regular character head texture. And it looks like we actually missed the end caps on our neck, but that can be done in cleanup. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to only do two sides of this. Technically three sides if we include the inside. Actually, yeah, three sides because we'll do the bottom too. I'm just trying to decide on what we're going to do for flat color or not. So we're going to do this whole side, UV, project from view, and this is more or less how I'm going to save space with my character. If you're going to want to cram more detail in for your character, be my guest. Absolutely, break this apart like you would do your cube, where you look at which faces are facing the camera most at each angle. But for me, I'm going to keep her hair pretty simple. Or use the same color as we do for the suit. But this time, actually, let's use our gray offset. Normally, I use the this base offset because I find it's pretty nice. I think this will work just fine for us. So we're going to set that in another step. Something like this. Once again, just kind of vague shapes. Because our next tutorial will be exactly what we're going to be working on, the higher level of detail, and then we can look at it around. And this is where I was like, okay, like we really don't need to cram too much level of detail in. Now, if I want this split right here to look a little bit more detailed, what I'm going to do is select all of these, and I know it divots in. So all I'm going to do is grab these points where it goes in. I'm going to push them out just like this. I'm going to try and give myself a little bit more workspace. Not much, I don't need much. Just a bit more. Until I can start to see sort of like this rift. I can take this, and then what we can do is do this. And I might take it off to where it tapers back like that. And once again, using that kind of warped distortion to get it to do what I want. And then the rest of this can be white. Let's check what it looks like under the UV just for safety. And that's kind of how I cheat certain effects, like like parts in hair and whatnot. All right, so I want to do the easy stuff next, which is going to be inside and the bottom. So the bottom is going to be pretty straightforward. We're just going to do the same thing that we did for the face. We're going to select all of it right here. And I can either do it from the bottom or the top, it doesn't matter. UV, project from view, and it's going to give us a side view of it. I do kind of want to maintain its shape. So what I'm going to do is select that side. And this is just in case there's any little teeny tiny bit of detail I want to carry off into it. So as you can tell, this isn't exactly like how we would handle our um, how we would handle our normal models, where we would just go and dive straight into UV mapping the entire shape, or at least 90% of the shape, before we would call it good. In this case, what we're doing is we're kind of splitting it apart into bite-sized chunks that we can work on ourselves. So right now I'm just trying to get these guys to agree with each other. And so that's a lot of working with complex shapes. And this applies to big, like high poly models, stuff that, obviously outside of our niche. Um, and this applies to anything else that you might be working on and want to do that might feel a little overwhelming, to be honest. Is break it down into bite-sized chunks. You don't need to take a bite out of the whole thing at once and then get overwhelmed and burned out. Now, instead, we can process it from each angle as we go and then adjust accordingly. And that's kind of why I wanted to, as we did our UV, instead of just dumping UVs out and doing maybe some vague, like wireframe markers, we did this raw, like super rough painting, because I wanted to really show, like, hey, like, it's important that we kind of cover this. Okay, so now for the inside of the head, the face. So this one is going to be only somewhat close to what we've got going on here. So what we can do is we can either do it all separate, we can do it together with the rest. So let's try doing it together. I think that'll be the easiest. So let's make sure we've not selected anything we don't need. If you're using industry standard, if you use Shift I, then you can do this kind of secluded selection where you can look at an individual model you're operating on. Unfortunately I don't know the hotkey for Blender hotkeys, and that's another thing that is part of working through these tutorials and learning about what you guys are fine with and what you guys want more information on, is especially like hotkeys and how to work those. And that's kind of why the magnifier is here and why I kind of avoid hotkeys. So you get used to knowing where to find things in menus, and then you can look at the tip, like whenever you hover over it, if it's got a hotkey suggestion or something like that. So we're going to project from view right here, and that's going to give us this. So we really just want the height. So from here to, gosh, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be a rough representation of our height. And now we should be able to shrink it down, trying to get this guy right here, this point right here, all the way over to here, as far as equal size. Oop, a little off up there. Bring it over, and wow, that's actually pretty close. We don't need to edit it much. And then we can bring this over here. Once again, if you don't, like, if your character does not have a like a uniform hairstyle or anything like that, and you're not using mirror, go ahead and apply all of these steps for the full shape, instead of, wondering, okay, I've done half the head, what about the other half? It's the same process. And I think that's the biggest part of this tutorial, is just showing off, like, for complex shapes like this hair that we're working on, or simple shapes, the process is really the same. And That makes it a little bit more palatable. All right, let's finish this up. I already know that several of you guys are eager for that texture tutorial, so I'm eager too, to be honest. And hopefully it won't take another whole month to come out. I can't predict how work is going to be, but I can at least promise that I try to work on these every weekend. And even if I can't get it out on time, I try to get it out at a reasonable time. All right, we're going to do just a little bit of detail once again. We're going to save a lot of that for tomorrow for our next tutorial. And this should wrap it up. Yeah, there she is. There is our character. So we're going to let's go back to our layout. Let's go to flat and texture up here. And then we're going to turn wireframe off because we want to take a look at it and see if there's anything odd about the character that we might want to change. Like for me, I feel the eyes are maybe a little too far down. But otherwise, the style that I was aiming for is here and it looks good. Let's make sure we don't have any, turn outline off. And turn that grid off too. All of the grid, all of the extras. 3D cursor and there we go. So this is the rough version of our model. All right, guys. Well, if you made it this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and for all of the comments too. I really appreciate the help in trying to optimize these and make these a little bit better. We've still got quite a bit to go. We've got a lot of detail in this character to put in, and then of course we do want to see if we can't do a little bit of super basic rigging for our character too, so we can do animations. I I really appreciate it. I just realized what's wrong with her face. I really appreciate all of the kind words and support, guys. Please, please keep telling me what I can improve on because it is super helpful. And the fact that literally 99.9% of you guys are real kind, real nice about stuff that I can work on and be better about instead of nasty. I absolutely appreciate it, especially when, you know, there are so many mean people out there. Thank you guys so much. Patreon name should be scrolling. If you want to try and throw money at me so that I can make these just a little bit sooner, go join the Patreon. It's not totally necessary. I provide 3D modeling files for all the projects that I work on the side over there. So like if you like some of my low poly Game Boy Color style models and you want to play around with those, I even have a few model sets you can put into your own game for free use except for a credit from me. And yeah, so thank you all so much. I will catch you on the flip side.